November 27, 1934, a cold Illinois evening. One of America's most wanted men, Lester Joseph Gillis, known by his nickname Babyface Nelson, was preparing to draw his last breath on the quiet streets of Barrington town. But how had this man, only 31 years old, become the FBI's greatest nightmare, and what had happened that day that cost two FBI agents their lives?
My name is Lester Joseph Gillis, but everyone knows me as Babyface Nelson. I never liked this nickname actually. This name given because of my youthful appearance makes me feel like a little child. But no one can deny that beneath this deceptive appearance, I was one of the most ruthless criminals of the Prohibition era. In November 1934, they were searching for me everywhere in the United States of America. The FBI had declared me public enemy number 1, and the bounty on my head was increasing every day. After John Dillinger was killed, I had practically inherited his throne. From the cold streets of Chicago to the sunny shores of California, federal agents were after me everywhere. That November day, my wife Helen and I were trying to get away from Chicago. My partner John Paul Chase was with us, a short dark-haired man who always remained quiet, but whom I could trust when I needed him. Helen was a woman in her 30s, with brown hair and worried eyes. Since marrying me, she had been living a fugitive life constantly, and the traces of fatigue were beginning to show on her face. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we were approaching Barrington town on Highway 14. This small Illinois town was a quiet and peaceful place north of Chicago. In the last days of autumn, the trees had shed their leaves, the roads were wet and slippery. The sky was covered with leaden clouds, and it was so cold that our breath came out as vapor. At that moment, I felt something was wrong. A strange sound had started coming from our car's engine. When I told Chase about the situation, I could see the worried expression on his face. I said we needed to stop at a gas station before entering Barrington. Maybe this was our biggest mistake. As we approached the gas station, I noticed there was too much activity around. There were too many cars here for a normal small-town gas station. My instincts told me there was danger, but we had no other choice to escape. The engine sound was getting worse and worse. The car could stop at any moment. While getting gas, I could feel Helen's tension. She constantly fidgeted with her hands in her lap, scanning the surroundings anxiously. Chase, as always, was trying to appear calm, but I could see the alertness in his eyes. Years of experience had taught us how critical such moments could be. That's when I saw them. Two men, wearing black coats, their hats pulled down over their eyes, were walking around the gas station. It wasn't hard to tell from their walk and posture that they were federal agents. They were FBI agents Samuel Cowley and Herman Hollis, both tall, athletic men with eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Cowley, as the leader of the special task force, had been tracking me for months. He was in his early 40s, with serious facial features, a man who always wore suits. Hollis was known as younger and more impetuous. Both seemed ready to risk their careers to capture me. After getting gas, we tried to get in the car quickly, but it was too late. Cowley and Hollis, along with other agents, had surrounded us. At that moment, I could feel my heart rate accelerating. Helen's breathing had become heavy. Chase's hand had gone to his gun. They got between their cars and ours and tried to stop us. But I wasn't going to stop. I had never surrendered to anyone in my life, and I wasn't going to that day. As I floored the gas pedal, I could see them chasing after us. This chase that started on Highway 14 turned the quiet streets of Barrington town into a battlefield. My car's speed was around 100 kilometers per hour, and we could barely hear each other because of the engine noise. Helen sat in the back seat, clinging in fear, while Chase checked his weapon beside me. The federal agents' cars were more powerful than ours. They were getting closer and closer. There was another agent in Cowley's car, William Ryan. This man was also a young, experienced agent who was doing everything he could to stop us. As I was experiencing those moments, the only thing that crossed my mind was the word freedom. Freedom. This word meant everything to me. Since childhood, I had learned not to bow down to anyone. Growing up on the west side of Chicago, as the son of an Irish immigrant father, we had struggled to survive every day. My father would work 16 hours in the factory, and when he came home in the evening, he would collapse, exhausted, into his chair. My mother tried to support our family's livelihood by cleaning in neighbors' houses. When I was 10 years old, what I saw while wandering the streets had affected me greatly. When passing through wealthy neighborhoods, I would watch people living in big houses. We deserved everything they had, but the system wouldn't give it to us. That's when I understood, if we wanted to take our rights, we had to take them with our own hands. I committed my first crime at 13. I had stolen food from a grocery store. When I was caught, the police officer took me home and handed me over to my mother. Seeing my mother cry that day broke my heart, but at the same time, it showed me how unfair the system was, because that grocer himself was charging the poor more money, exploiting them. As the years passed, I delved into the depths of the criminal world. During Al Capone's reign, even taking a step on Chicago's streets required courage, but I wasn't afraid. I never worked with Capone's organization. I formed my own gang. I preferred to remain independent because I didn't want to be accountable to anyone. The Prohibition era was actually the golden age for people like us. The alcohol ban had made ordinary people criminals. Everyone was looking for bootleg liquor, and we were giving it to them. But I didn't just do alcohol smuggling, bank robberies, car theft, mugging. I committed all kinds of crimes but never harmed innocent people. My target was always the system, the rich and their protectors. In the outskirts of Barrington, in an empty field, my car finally stopped. The engine had completely broken down, and we had nowhere left to escape. This field reflected all the melancholy of the autumn season. Yellowed grass, willow trees with drooping branches, the sounds of crows coming from afar. It was as if nature itself was staging this final scene of mine. That's when the most critical moment of my life came. Chase and I got out of the car and came face to face with the federal agents. The dry leaves crunching under my feet created the sound effects of this dramatic moment. The wind was blowing the hem of my jacket and bringing my hair in front of my eyes. The cold November air was biting our skin. Around us were bare trees, smoke rising from distant houses, and frozen ground. The sun was about to set, and everything appeared in gray tones. This quiet, pastoral landscape created a strange contrast with the violence about to unfold. Cowley told us through a megaphone to surrender, but I had already made my decision. As I took my Thompson submachine gun in my hand, I knew this would be my last battle. Chase was also beside me, having drawn his pistol, waiting ready. When the shootout began, I felt as if time had stopped. I fired the first shots, and the federal agents immediately returned fire. The smell of gunpowder filled my nose. The echo of gunshots deafened my ears. Helen had hidden behind the car, screaming in fear. During this shootout, the things that crossed my mind were very strange. I remembered an article I had read in a newspaper years ago. The article was titled, "America's Changing Face," and talked about the increase in crime rates. I had laughed at this news at the time. Now I realized that I was part of those statistics. When Dillinger was killed, I had never thought I would take his place, but the media portrayed me that way. Getting the title New Public Enemy #1 was both gratifying and frightening, because this title meant that the FBI would bring all its power upon me. Edgar Hoover's new strategies had indeed been effective. Previously, the FBI was just an investigative unit, but now, they were taking the field with armed and trained agents. Their technology had also advanced fingerprint analysis, photo archives, communication systems. It was becoming increasingly difficult for us to escape. I wounded Cowley first. He had been shot in the chest, and I could see him fall to the ground. At the moment he fell, I noticed that the determination in his eyes hadn't disappeared. This man would try to do his duty until his last breath. What I saw in this scene was not just a shootout, but the collision of two different worlds. But he still fought until his last breath. Hollis took his place and started running toward me. This man's courage was truly admirable. Chase had managed to wound Ryan, but he wasn't giving up either. The training of these federal agents was really excellent. Even when they came face to face with death, they continued to do their duty. As the shootout continued, I felt a bullet pierce my chest. Pain spread throughout my body, but I didn't stop. Another bullet hit my stomach, and I realized I was starting to lose blood. But I was still fighting. I managed to wound Hollis too, but he had also shot me. As we both fell to the ground, we had looked at each other. There was no hatred in his eyes, just the determination of a man doing his duty. Maybe at that moment, I had felt a kind of respect for him. Chase was trying to carry me to the car. Helen came to me crying and held my hands. I was getting weaker due to blood loss, but I wasn't finished yet. Adrenaline continued to circulate in my body. At that moment, I started thinking about the last years of my life. After Dillinger's death, I had tried to take his place. Our escapes from Chicago's South Side to Little Bohemia to Wisconsin had made it impossible for the FBI to catch me, I thought. But now I understood that this was just an illusion. As a child, I had grown up on the west side of Chicago. As a child of an Irish origin family, during my childhood years spent in poverty, I had never thought I would become so famous one day. When I committed my first crime at 13, my mother had cried. Now, lying on the ground covered in blood, I remembered her tears from that day. When I met Helen, I knew she just wanted an ordinary life. But she had loved me and chosen to stay by my side on this dangerous journey. Now, looking into her fearful eyes, I thought I hadn't been a worthy husband to her. We had always lived a fugitive life. We never had a normal home, a normal life. Having Chase by my side was comforting in these final moments. He was a child of the streets like me. We had traveled a long way together from Minneapolis to Chicago. In our bank robberies, in our escapes, he was always the only person I could trust. Now, he was also wounded, but was still staying with me. Cowley and Hollis were in very bad condition. Both were seriously wounded, and Ryan was trying to help them. There was no fear of death in Cowley's eyes, just the sadness of not being able to complete his mission. These men were truly fighting for their country. Maybe they weren't different from us. They just stood on the other side of the law. The FBI's new tactics had indeed been effective. In the old days, dealing with local police was easy. But these federal agents were trained, disciplined, and relentless men. This new system that Hoover had established had made it impossible for people like us to survive in the criminal world. There was no winner in this shootout. We had all lost in some way. Chase managed to drive the damaged car in my injured state, and we got away from there. But I knew I couldn't go very far. The blood loss was accelerating, and my consciousness was coming and going. Helen kept trying to talk to me, doing everything she could to keep me awake. A few miles later, I realized I couldn't take it anymore. I told Chase to stop. I knew these would be my final moments. As Helen's tears streamed down her cheeks, I tried to hug her one last time. The pain I was experiencing wasn't just physical. I felt spiritually exhausted too. This chase game that had lasted for years had finally worn me down. The FBI's pressure had increased every day. The number of men I could trust had decreased. There was nowhere left for me to hide. They knew me in every corner of America now. The newspapers portrayed me as a monster, but I was just a man trying to survive. In this chaotic environment created by the Prohibition era, everyone was writing their own rules. I had written my own rules too, and defended them to the end. I never wanted to harm innocent people. I had only fought against the system. As I stroked Helen's hair, I remembered the day we first met. She was so young and hopeful. She had grown up in Gary, Indiana, in a factory town. Her father worked in a steel factory, and her family lived a modest but honorable life. When I met Helen, I felt like I was entering her pure and clean world. She didn't judge me, didn't question my past. She just loved. When we got married, I had promised her I would give her a normal life. A small house, children playing in the garden, Sunday morning church. We had dreamed of all these things. But these dreams slowly disappeared with the FBI's increasing pressure. Every house we moved to became a temporary stop. Every person we met could be a potential informant. The period when Helen was pregnant was one of the happiest times of my life. But it was also the time I was most afraid. I didn't want our child to come into such a world. Eventually, Helen miscarried the baby. The doctor had said stress played a big role in this. That day, I felt like a failure, as both a father and a husband. Now, there was only sorrow and fear in her eyes. I blamed myself for not being able to give her a better life. Maybe we could have escaped and started with a new identity in a distant place, maybe in Mexico or Canada, but it was too late now. The FBI's net was woven so tightly that there was no place left for us to hide on the American continent. Chase was constantly scanning around. He was checking whether federal agents were coming or not. He also knew these were our final moments. His capture would also be a matter of time, but he had still stayed by my side. This loyalty impressed me even in these final moments. On that cold November night, in the countryside of Illinois, I was saying goodbye to life at only 31 years old. I was leaving behind blood, violence, and chaos. But at the same time, I was also experiencing the pride of never having surrendered. The federal government had caught me, but not alive, but dead. As I drew my last breath, I was holding Helen's hand. Chase was standing there silently. Ambulance sirens could be heard in the distance, but it was too late now. Babyface Nelson's story was ending here. Cowley and Hollis also lost their lives that night. 3 men, from 3 different sides, but we shared the same fate. The Prohibition era had ended, but the stories of men like us would live forever in America's collective memory.
This shootout was recorded as one of the bloodiest operations in FBI history. Babyface Nelson's death marked the symbolic end of organized crime organizations' war against the federal government. That cold November evening in Barrington marked not only the end of 3 men, but also the end of an era. This generation of criminals who grew up in the chaotic environment created by Prohibition had learned that they could no longer stand against the modern FBI.